I used to think that some dreams were simple enough to hold in your pocket, like a folded photograph you could take out when the world felt too heavy. Then I watched someone I loved carry a dream so quietly that it broke without making a sound, and I learned how small kindness and quiet cruelty can both finish a hope. That ache, the soft ongoing ache of watching a promise to yourself dissolve, is the feeling Steinbeck traps in of Mice and Men. Today I want to walk you through 7 symbols that make that ache unavoidable, and oddly full of meaning. This is Symbolism Decoded, and if you stay with me, I promise the book will feel less like an old story, and more like something living in the room with us. The ranch in the novel is more than a setting, it's a breathing place of fragile hope. It looks like work to anyone passing by. To Steinbeck's characters it hums with promises. Those promises are small and specific: a patch of land, a few animals, mornings that feel like ownership instead of rent. But the ranch is also a pressure cooker, a place where social forces, loneliness, and the raw need to survive squeeze dreams until they fray. When I call it a place of fragile hope, I mean that it offers the exact thing the characters want while constantly reminding them how little control they have. First symbol, the farm dream, impossible hope. George and Lennie's plan for their own piece of land is the novel's heartbeat. On paper it looks simple: a plot of land, some crops, a couple of animals, and the freedom to say no. But Steinbeck dresses that plan in specifics: how much land, the price of the pig, the smell of the work in the morning, so it feels tactile. That tactile detail is the trick. The more real the dream smells, the more unbearable its potential loss. The truth the book quietly insists on is that dreams can become emotional infrastructure, supporting people through bad days, and when infrastructure collapses, people fall harder. Second symbol, Lennie's puppies, innocence and destruction. Lennie's soft hands and his love for small creatures represent a childlike innocence that's not malicious. Yet his strength turns tenderness into danger. The puppies show how something adorable and fragile can promise comfort and then be the instrument of ruin. Steinbeck uses these moments to ask the painful question: what happens to goodness when it meets a world that doesn't understand how to care for it? Third symbol, Candy's dog as mercy and loss. Candy's dog, old and stinking, is everyone's first close-up of mercy taken the wrong way. For Candy, the dog is history, years of routine, of recognition, a living repository of memory. But for the younger men it is useless and embarrassing, a practical liability. When the dog is removed, it's framed as a kindness, but it reads like the book's first lesson in compromise. Sometimes our society decides to prune what it calls weakness. Candy's reaction, a mixture of relief and numb grief, mirrors the broader treatment of those who don't fit the economic machine. Fourth symbol, Curley's wife, loneliness and danger. She is unnamed and therefore shaped into an archetype. She walks the ranch like someone suspended between wanting to be seen and fearing being seen. Her flirtations are not just reckless, they are desperate acts of trying to tether a life that is otherwise invisible. Steinbeck complicates her by giving us both her flirtatious surface and the loneliness that fuels it, which turns the symbol into a tragic human being rather than a caricature. She reminds us that danger often wears the face of unmet longing. Fifth symbol, the riverbank, peace and tragedy. The novel opens and closes with the riverbank, a place of green shade and an almost holy calm. It is where Lennie imagines tending rabbits, and where memories come back clean. But that peace has a double edge. It is the last refuge from a relentless world, and therefore the site where tragedy becomes both inevitable and intimate. Steinbeck uses the riverbank to remind us that shelter can be a prelude to sorrow when the world's pressures follow you there. Sixth symbol, George's hands, burden of care. George's hands, literally and metaphorically, hold the novel's moral load. They plan, they soothe, they make bargains, and they perform the hard labor of responsibility. Those hands are symbols of caretaking that costs you pieces of yourself. George's touch is a comfort to Lennie, but it's also a chain, the visible price of standing between a friend and a world that would otherwise destroy him. In that way, Steinbeck makes caregiving itself a kind of sacrifice that leaves marks. Seventh symbol, mice and rabbits, fragile dreams. Lennie's fixation on soft animals is not trivial. It is the book's recurring prism for what people imagine their futures will feel like. Mice are small blue sky comforts. Rabbits are the tangible promise that the dream came true. But every pet, Every animal that Lennie cradles points to how delicate hope is when it depends on other hearts and other hands. Steinbeck teaches that the very tenderness that gives us hope can make those dreams more vulnerable to collapse. When I read these symbols together, what hits me is how Steinbeck refuses tidy answers. He gives us beauty and cruelty in the same breath and asks us to hold both. That unresolved tension is what makes the book feel alive and why it still stings when you walk away from it. And why does this feel urgent in 2026? Because the world we live in continues to shrink the space for small human dreams. Jobs are less steady, connections are more fractured, and the cost of care, emotional and financial, has become a major moral question. Steinbeck's voice asks us to notice how loneliness corrodes people, how mercy can look like convenience, and how responsibility leaves invisible scars. If we forget these lessons, we risk repeating every quiet failure the novel mourns. So I'll leave you with this personal thought. Watch for the small promises people carry in their pockets. They are not trivial. They are the quiet scaffolding of a life. If you liked this close reading and want more close readings that feel like conversations, please subscribe to Symbolism Decoded. Like the video if this moved you, and if it did, leave a comment telling me one small dream you've watched fade, or one you're trying to keep alive. I read every comment and will hold those stories gently here. Thanks for listening.